This is Rainy Night Horrors. Outside, the storm brews, and with it comes something darker. Every drop masks a sound, every shadow holds a shape. You're not imagining it, you're hearing the truth. Listen closely. It's already here. Before me gaped the alley, a fissure of shadow splitting the electric paint splash of the city night. A shortcut I knew better than to take, yet lateness gnawed. My shift at the Night Owl Cafe beckoned. Just this once, a treacherous whisper in my mind. What harm could bloom in 5 saved minutes? The darkness folding around me felt like an answer, swift and absolute. For half a year, the graveyard shift at the Night Owl had been my rhythm, the quiet hum funding textbooks and tuition. Usually, the 20-minute trek from my cramped apartment was a buffer, a space to decompress. Tonight, however, exam cramming had devoured the clock, leaving me scrambling against Sal's inevitable displeasure. Even nearing midnight, the avenues throbbed. Headlights streamed, music spilled like cheap wine from doorways, and figures ambled through the balmy summer air. Another night, perhaps, I'd have found poetry in this urban pulse. Tonight, it was merely noise, backdrop to the ticking clock, and Sal's anticipated lecture. Then I saw it, the slender void between 2 brick behemoths, a known passage promising precious minutes shaved off my journey. Maternal warnings, ingrained instincts about shadowed spaces and unseen threats usually held sway. But desperation tonight was a sharper spur than caution. A breath drawn deep, a plunge into the waiting black. Instantly, the city's clamor receded, replaced by a profound, almost suffocating hush. Only the phantom drip of unseen water, the rustle of something small and swift in the refuse, punctuated the silence. The air hung thick, cloying, scented with decay, and an undercurrent I couldn't name. My pace quickened, my own footfalls unnervingly loud against the confining walls. Escape velocity. That was the goal. Halfway through, perhaps less, another rhythm intruded. Footsteps, heavier, more deliberate than my own, echoing from behind. A spike of adrenaline, quickly tamped down. Just someone else, cutting through, I reasoned. Nothing more. But then a second set joined the first, and a third. A glance, stolen over my shoulder, turned my veins to ice. 3 shapes detached themselves from the deeper gloom, their faces obscured, yet their intent radiated, a palpable hunger in their convergence. Faster now, my hands knotting into useless fists. The alley's exit, a distant shimmer of street lamp orange, felt leagues away. Their pace matched mine, escalating, shedding any pretense of coincidence. "Evening, little bird," one voice rasped, coarse and laced with mockery. "Flying somewhere fast?" Silence was my only shield. Eyes locked on the escape hatch glow, I walked, hoping invisibility might be my armor. A hand clamped onto my arm, arresting my motion, spinning me violently. I faced them then, under the weak spill of a tenement window light. 3 men looming large, their eyes hard chips of flint, mouths stretched in predatory smiles. "Didn't anyone teach you manners?" sneered the one gripping my arm, his breath a foul mix of stale liquor and smoke. My attempt to wrench free was futile. His hold tightened, fingers digging in. "Please," the word escaped, small, fragile, humiliatingly terrified. "I need to get to work. I don't want any trouble." Laughter bounced off the brick, amplifying, surrounding me. "Hear that, fellas?" the leader crowed. "She doesn't want trouble. Shame that." Fear was a paralysis, a cold flood stealing thought and breath. Scream? Run? Fight? My body refused, a rabbit frozen in the predator's gaze. He shoved me backward, hard against the grimy brick, his face uncomfortably close. "The purse, sweetheart. Nice and easy. Maybe we let you flutter on home." My bag, clutched tight against my chest. Not just my wallet, but my notes, the dense weight of textbooks, my academic lifeline for tomorrow's ordeal. "No," I heard myself say, the firmness a startling anomaly in the terror. His eyes narrowed to slits. "No? You don't get it, do you? This ain't a request." His hand reached, fingers splayed to snatch the bag. Something fractured inside me. Perhaps the raw terror, perhaps a surge of pure defiant rage at being cornered. The victim dissolved. My knee drove upward, a sharp, desperate blow connecting squarely. A guttural groan, the man folding inward. I didn't hesitate. Shoving past his doubled-over form, I ran. Shouts erupted behind me, the thunder of pursuing feet pounding the cracked pavement. Fear lent wings, adrenaline a desperate fuel, propelling me faster than I knew possible. The alley mouth widened, the streetlights a sanctuary calling my name. Almost there. Fingers tangled in the back of my shirt, yanking me off balance. I stumbled, recovered, spun. Another one stood before me, face contorted in fury, hand raised to strike. Instinct took over. My bag, heavy with knowledge and desperation, swung in a wide arc. The satisfying thud of textbooks against his skull echoed briefly. He staggered, momentarily stunned. Again, I ran, lungs burning, heart hammering against ribs like a trapped bird. People dotted the main street now, their ordinary movements a world away from the violence unfolding mere feet away. "Help!" The scream tore from my throat as I burst onto the relative safety of the sidewalk. "Someone, please, help me." Heads swiveled, conversations paused. Behind me, the distinct sound of retreating footsteps, my assailants dissolving back into the alley's embrace. A man and woman hurried towards me, her arm a steadying weight on my shoulder, his phone already pressed to his ear, voice urgent as he spoke to the police. It was done. I was out. The following hour was a fractured sequence of flashing lights, official questions, and the kindness of strangers. By the time I finally reached the Night Owl Cafe, the clock showed me disgracefully late. But Sal, seeing my tear-streaked face, the lingering tremor in my hands, perhaps the ghost of the police car that dropped me nearby, let his usual gruffness evaporate. "Saints alive, Anya," he murmured, guiding me toward an empty booth. "Shifts forgotten. Sit. Coffee's coming." Sipping the scalding brew, hands still not quite steady, I replayed the night. How easily it could have twisted into something far worse. Had fear won completely, had strength failed me, but it hadn't. When the precipice loomed, a resilience I hadn't known existed had surfaced. I fought. I endured. They were never caught, those shadows from the alley. Yet, in the days and weeks that followed, I refused to cede territory to fear. Self-defense classes became a ritual, pepper spray a constant companion, and yes, dark alleys remained untrodden paths. But I walked still, pursued my degree, lived. That night had forged a crucial understanding. The world holds sharp edges and deep shadows, but resilience runs deeper still. Refusing the mantle of victim was, sometimes, the most powerful act. Echoes of that night linger. A late walk home, the sight of a darkened passage between buildings. They can still stir the phantom chill of fear, the frantic pulse of adrenaline. But stronger now is the memory of the turn. The instant defiance flared, the discovery of my own unexpected power. It's a lesson etched deep, a quiet certainty that even in the starkest moments, we possess the spark to illuminate our own path. No shadow, however deep, can truly extinguish that internal light. And now, years on, when my route to the office, long past the era of late-night cafes, takes me past that same fissure in the urban landscape, fear is absent. Pride resides there instead. Pride in the terrified young woman who clawed her way back from the brink. Pride in the distance traveled since. Because ultimately, navigating life isn't about bypassing the dark alleys entirely. It's about knowing, deep within, that should we find ourselves swallowed by one, we hold the power to fight our way back into the light. That knowledge, that strength, is indelible. The sky wept, a relentless drumming against the shingles overhead. My own pulse echoed it, a frantic rhythm against my ribs. My fingers laced together to still their tremor. Days I'd strained for this sound, this liquid percussion that heralded their return, the inexplicable footprints. I recall the first visitation. A peculiar dripping, insistent, lured me towards the attic's shadowed maw, suspicion of a leaky roof tightening my chest. What I found wasn't water damage, but impressions soaked into the thick dust, the startlingly clear prints of bare feet. They materialized abruptly in the attic's heart, a trail leading with unnerving purpose straight to the dormer window, where they ceased utterly at the sill. Vanished. With a discarded rag, I tried scrubbing them away, noting their dimensions. Smaller than my own, yet adult, the stride between them erratic, hesitant, as if the walker navigated by stealth. I scanned the rafters, the floorboards, seeking the source, the plausible leak. Futility. Save for the precise outlines of those phantom feet, the attic remained bone dry, dust undisturbed. Sunlight the next morning painted a different scene. The dust lay smooth, inviolate. No damp patches marred the floor. The window frame? Solid, sealed against the elements. A trick of the mind, I reasoned. Perhaps I'd tracked something in myself, though my shoes hadn't left my feet. The memory blurred, conveniently. A rainless week drifted by. Then, clouds gathered, bruised and heavy. Around the cusp of midnight, the downpour began. Flashlight clutched tight. I ascended the narrow stairs, breath catching high in my throat, muscles coiling with a strange mix of dread and compulsion. Pushing open the attic door, I swept the light's beam across the floorboards. They were back. Identical shape, same scale, their path unwavering from the floor's center to the waiting window. I aimed the light upwards. The central beam was sound. The corners, arid. Only the footprints wept moisture onto the aged wood. Kneeling, I pressed my palm flat beside one. The surrounding planks were parched. Tentatively, I traced the path, the air growing thick, my heart a frantic drum against my sternum, a band tightening around my skull. Each print was a distinct map of toes, arch, heel. Brushing a fingertip across one confirmed its damp chill, the moisture clinging to my skin. Wiping my hand absently on my trousers, I crept towards the window, where the trail ended abruptly. Leaning into the frame, I peered out into the storm-lashed dark. Wind flung icy droplets against my face. A sudden, solid thump from directly above, a loose shingle shifting. Craning my neck, pushing my head further into the tempest, I sought the source, and saw it. Crouched near the roof's far edge, a silhouette against the turbulent sky. Hunched shoulders, a spine unnaturally curved, its head bowed towards the distant glimmer of streetlights. I froze, knuckles white on the sill, the flashlight beam trembling in my other hand. I directed the light towards the shape. A flicker of motion, impossibly quick, and it slid sideways, evading the illumination. No face discernible, no details, just a presence. Weakness flooded my legs. My throat felt scraped raw. I pulled back inside, the latch clicking loudly as I secured the already locked window. How? How could anything reach that perch? The gutters were ancient, frail. No ladder leaned against the house. The ascent seemed impossible. Returning to the footprints, I searched for any deviation, any clue. Nothing. Sleep offered little respite that night, haunted by the image of that crooked silhouette in the rain-swept darkness. Morning brought a futile inspection. Circling the house, I scanned the roofline, the surrounding ground. No broken branches, no scuff marks on the shingles, nothing displaced. Upstairs, the attic was once again pristine. Footprints gone, dampness evaporated, as if mocking my memory. Determined, I swept the floor meticulously, erasing the dust, seeking a clean slate for the next inevitable deluge. Days bled into weeks. How to prepare? Cameras felt extravagant beyond my means. Motion sensors seemed inadequate, unlikely to capture whatever this was. A restlessness took root. Every darkening cloud sent a jolt through me, a fusion of anxiety and a perverse, consuming curiosity. Thunder became a summons. I needed to confront the source, to see the maker of those phantom tracks. Eventually, the familiar rumble returned, shaking the window panes in the living room. A deep, steadying breath. Flashlight in hand, I climbed, shoulders rigid beneath my shirt. The attic door swung inward, releasing a faint, telltale smell of damp earth and ozone. I flipped the switch. The naked bulb cast weak, yellow light, and there they lay, glistening. The same genesis point, the same trajectory towards the glass. I followed, step by measured step, crouching to touch a print. Cold. A knot formed low in my stomach. Then, a distinct scrape from overhead on the roof itself. I flinched, flashlight beam skittering across the rafters. The sound seemed to originate directly above. Decision hardened within me. I strode to the window, unlatched it, wrestled it open, propping it with a forgotten block of wood. Wind howled, driving rain splattering the floor behind me. Leaning out, gripping the frame, I eased my upper body through the opening. Rain plastered my shirt to my skin, stinging my eyes. A scan to the left revealed only slick black shingles dissolving into the night. To the right, there, at the roof's apex, a faint bent shape. That same watcher, seemingly absorbed by the distant view. No face visible, no discernible breath, nothing recognizably human in its stillness. My voice, when I found it, was a ragged tremor. "Who's there?" The sound felt small, swallowed by the storm. A slight shift in the figure's posture. "Hello?" Only the rain answered. Gritting my teeth, I retreated momentarily, pulling on old rubber boots and a heavy, waterproof jacket kept in a nearby trunk. Back at the window, I clambered out. My boots skidded precariously on the wet shingles. Slowly, painstakingly, I began to ascend towards the peak, the wind a physical force, rain drumming against my hood. My hands shook violently. My heart felt dangerously overstretched, ready to tear. Closer now, I could see it crouched low, knees almost touching the roof. It remained oblivious, unmoving. "What are you doing?" I shouted again, the wind snatching the words. Its shoulders hitched, a rhythmic rise and fall, suggesting breath, but still, it didn't turn. My legs trembled uncontrollably. Water seeped into my boots. One more step. My foot slipped. A grunt escaped me as I dropped heavily to my knees, palms scraping raw against the abrasive shingles. Pain flared. When I looked up, blinking rain from my eyes, the figure was gone, vanished. I scanned the peak, the angles of the roof, the darkness below. Nothing. A sudden noise, a skittering sound behind me. I spun, heart leaping, but saw only empty, rain-slicked shingles. The risk felt suddenly immense. Carefully, agonizingly, I retreated to the attic window, clothes sodden, fingers and toes numb with cold. Tumbling back inside, I slammed the window shut, collapsing onto the floorboards, utterly spent, frustration a bitter taste in my mouth. The following morning, another meticulous search for forced entry yielded nothing. The attic window remained securely locked from within. The roof bore no marks. Doubt gnawed, whispering that I'd hallucinated the entire encounter, yet the memory of the damp prints, the stark silhouette, remained vivid, undeniable. As a flimsy precaution, I resolved to barricade the attic door with a heavy chair during the next storm, listening for any sound of its displacement. A foolish gesture, perhaps, born of helplessness. A long dry spell followed. A fragile calm settled, only to shatter whenever the sky turned leaden. That familiar adrenaline surge, the tightening in my gut, my own home felt alien, unsafe. I spent hours sorting boxes in the attic, seeking anomalies, examining floorboards, walls, the window frame. All sound, all ordinary. One clear afternoon, I even ventured onto the roof itself, walking its expanse cautiously, checking for hidden hatches, loose panels, anything. Nothing. No secret entrances, no plausible hiding spots. The unsettling thought surfaced again, stronger this time. Was the figure even human? I pushed it down, clinging to the desire for a rational, earthly explanation. Then, inevitably, nightfall brought the bruised clouds, the opening chords of the storm. Rain lashed the glass, my chest constricted. Walking to the attic door, I moved the chair aside, turned the knob. The house groaned around me. The weak bulb flickered on. They were there, glistening under the stark light, I approached, halting at the first print, comparing it to my own sock-clad foot. The difference was stark, not mine. Narrower, the toes pressed tightly together, the heel sharply defined. Crouching, I touched the collected water. Cold. My hand trembled. A low, protracted creak resonated from the rafters above. I froze, breath held, eyes darting towards the window. In the dark glass, a distorted reflection of the attic swam, my own form, the dusty boxes, and something else. A flicker of movement behind me in the reflected image. I spun around. Nothing, just shadows and the smell of rain. My vision tunneled, every muscle tensed. Enough. Standing abruptly, I marched to the window, flung it open. Rain lashed my face, my shirt. I thrust my head out, scanning the roof. It was there, perched near the peak, gaze fixed on the unseen horizon, shoulders slumped, utterly motionless. I yelled, my voice raw. No reaction. A desperate, consuming need surged through me. To see its face, to hear it speak, to understand the why of those watery tracks. I climbed out again, leaving the window gaping behind me. Rain blinded me, coated my lips with its flat taste. My jacket became a heavy, sodden skin. On hands and knees, I crawled upward, grappling for purchase on the slick incline. Heart pounding fit to burst, arms trembling with exertion. Halfway to the peak, I paused, lifting my head. The figure remained, an unwavering statue in the downpour. Steeling myself, I crept closer, shouting again, pleading now. Silence, save for the storm. I risked rising slightly, staying low. Perhaps 6 feet separated us now. Details sharpened slightly. The narrow set of the shoulders, a long neck craned forward, the glint of pale skin on its arms beneath the relentless cascade of water. Still no face, just shadow and implication. My mouth was parchment dry despite the rain. Suddenly, with a startling liquid grace, the figure shifted. It rose to its full height, turning its head fractionally towards me. For an instant, I thought I glimpsed 2 deep, lightless eyes, but the impression was fleeting, uncertain. Then, it crouched low and launched itself over the roof's peak. A scrape, a soft thud, fading into the storm's roar. I scrambled forward, ignoring the fire in my scraped knees. Reaching the apex, I peered down. The backyard was empty, swallowed by darkness. Neighboring houses remained unlit, oblivious. Rain fell, washing everything clean, leaving no trace of the figure on the ground, the fence, anywhere. I knelt there for a long moment, gasping, chest aching, soaked, shivering, knees throbbing. Turning, I crawled back, the retreat agonizingly slow. I tumbled back into the attic, collapsing onto the floor amidst a growing puddle. My gaze fell on the footprints, still leading faithfully to the window. My mind churned, grasping for logic, finding none. Mechanically, I closed the window, mopped at the water with an old cloth. The prints stayed, ghostly impressions, until I deliberately dried each one. Hours later, the storm passed, leaving behind a profound quiet. The next day dawned clear. No new footprints. The attic was just an attic again, but the house felt different. Watched. The figure's impossible speed, its traceless disappearance. It wasn't normal. It wasn't human. I remain in this house. When the forecast speaks of rain, the familiar tension coils in my stomach. Ritualistically, I climb the stairs. I switch on the feeble light. I search the floor. Sometimes they appear. Sometimes the dust lies undisturbed. When they are present, I inevitably go to the window. And usually, I see it, that hunched shape on the roof, contemplating the horizon. It never acknowledges me, never attempts entry. It simply exists, leaves its watery signature, and dissolves back into the night. Moving seems logical, yet I stay, bound by a need for answers I suspect will never come. A morbid curiosity keeps me tethered, hoping, perhaps foolishly, to finally understand. I even installed a cheap motion-activated camera aimed at the floor. It captures nothing but the sudden appearance of wet prints, lens sometimes speckled with inexplicable droplets. No figure ever triggers it. No visible entity walks that path. It's as if the dampness itself remembers a step. So I endure, living with the porous boundary between the known and the unknown. I watch the sky, and when the first drops begin their percussive song on my roof, my pulse quickens. I climb the stairs, push open the door, sweep the flashlight beam across the floor. The footprints manifest, leading always to the window. I approach. I look out. I see the shape, crouched and waiting, and I stand there, a silent observer of my own haunting, until it elects to leap or fade, leaving me alone once more with the receding rain and the inexplicable marks upon my attic floor. The ancient oak portal yielded with a protracted groan, its hinges echoing like a startled cry down the central nave of the library. Silence reigned absolute, thick and undisturbed save for my intrusion. Midnight had long chimed. A solitary lamp cast a wan halo upon the vacant circulation desk, sentinel over slumbering knowledge. Permission granted. Stay till dawn, disturb nothing. The night watchman's parting words. A promise easily made. One volume, obscure and ancient, its reference scribbled on a crumpled note deep within my coat. That was my sole quarry. Timbers groaned underfoot as I navigated the first aisle, the air thick with the scent of decaying paper, beeswax polish, and something indefinably old. Dark wood shelving soared towards the vaulted ceiling, their contents slumbering in shadow. Above, antiquated fixtures shed a jaundiced, insufficient light. Bulbs sputtered intermittently, brief novas in the gloom. No mechanical hum, no whisper of ventilation, only the distant metronomic heartbeat of an unseen clock punctuating the stillness. My fingers tracing the scarred spines of leather-bound tomes, many stripped of their jackets, their titles faded or lost to time, found the designated call number etched onto a small brass plaque. There it was, the manuscript, swaddled in some indeterminate, dun-colored fabric, its texture like desiccated skin beneath my touch. I bore it to a nearby reading table, a scarred veteran whose uneven legs caused it to rock precariously as I laid my prize upon its surface. The heavy chair protested my pull with a raw scrape against the floorboards. Yellowed, ossified pages crackled as I turned them, revealing a script like tangled thorns, utterly alien to my eye. I leaned closer, tracing the impossible ligatures with a fingertip, and then a sound, a dry, stifled chuckle, brief as a moth's wing beat. My head snapped up, nothing but the towering sentinels of bound paper receding into shadow. Seconds stretched, taut and silent. I returned to the text. Another page turned. Again, the phantom mirth, closer this time, seeming to emanate not from the room, but from the very fibers of the manuscript itself. I held my breath, straining to hear past the faint ticking and the low buzz of the lamps. Nothing. A sudden unease compelled me to survey the aisles again. A slow turn revealed corridors stretching into impossible distances, more numerous than the 5 or 6 I'd counted upon entry. Now, perhaps 10, 12. The parquet floor seemed subtly altered, its familiar patterns warped. Where the clear path back to the entrance should have been, a monolith of shelving now stood defiant. Hadn't I walked a straight line to this table? Now, a bewildering curve defined the path. Fatigue, I told myself. Rubbing tired eyes. Simple exhaustion. Back at the table, I drew the lamp nearer, its bulb humming a soft threnody. I forced myself to turn another page. A tiny giggle, sharp and clear, seemed to lift directly from the ink. Gooseflesh prickled my arms, my throat constricted. Gently, reverently, I closed the volume. Standing, I craved air, escape, even for a moment. The entrance? I remembered it directly behind me, perhaps 20 paces. Now, only shelves met my gaze. Circling the table, I peered down one aisle. It plunged into a darkness deeper than geometry allowed. Another led only to more towering stacks. I rotated slowly, a compass seeking a lost north. No front desk, no door, just an endless, silent forest of books. My pulse quickened, a frantic drummer against my ribs. A clammy dampness bloomed on my forehead. Hello? The word, swallowed by the vastness, returned as a weak echo. Is anyone there? Silence answered. Then, a faint scraping, the sound of a sharp edge dragged across wood. It ceased the instant my attention fixed upon it. Tentatively, I stepped towards the source. Overhead lights flickered violently. The cloying scent of old varnish intensified. No windows pierced these walls. No emergency signs offered illusory hope. Only the dim lamps and the labyrinthine shelves. My path in, straight from the door. Find the volume. Sit. Now, utterly lost. I pressed onward down an aisle. 8 feet of densely packed spines loomed on either side, a monotonous landscape of dark leather and faded cloth. Reaching the end, I turned right into another identical corridor, hurrying now, seeking any boundary, any wall. Instead, I found myself inexplicably back near the reading table, the manuscript lying open upon it. A circle. I snatched the volume, tucking it under my arm. Perhaps returning it would appease whatever logic governed this place. I recalled the shelf, the brass plaque, but retracing my steps led only to unfamiliar shelves, different books. Aisle after aisle yielded nothing familiar. The laughter within the manuscript had ceased, yet its weight seemed to grow, dense and significant under my arm. Another flicker of the lights, accompanied by a low vibration through the floorboards, as if something immense had shifted. Glancing back, I saw it, a bookcase, vast and silent, gliding inches across the floor, leaving score marks in its wake. A low groan of tortured timber followed. Panic tightened its cold fist around my lungs, though I fought for calm. My breath came in ragged gasps, my mouth arid. Keep it together, I whispered inwardly, arguing against the blatant impossibility unfolding before me. The shelves were moving, rearranging the very architecture of the library. I struck out, determined to find a perimeter wall, straight down a corridor, resisting the urge to turn, pushing ever forward. Time blurred. Still, only shelves surrounded me. Pausing, I rested a hand against a stack. The covers felt unnaturally cold. Onward again, until finally, a corner, and in it, a door, narrow, with a small pane of glass set high. Locked. The handle refused to turn. I rattled it, pushed, knocked. The sound was dull, absorbed by the wood. No echo. The scraping returned. Closer now. Pressing my ear to the door yielded only silence from beyond. Turning, defeated, I faced another long aisle receding into gloom. The lamps buzzed insistently. The Polish smell was stronger here. My reflection, caught in the glass of a fire extinguisher cabinet, showed a pale, sweat-sheened face. The scrap of paper with the reference number remained in my pocket, a useless talisman now. The floor felt subtly uneven beneath my feet, tilting slightly. Then, a voice, a sibilant whisper, breathed my name. I froze. I hadn't given my name. No one had asked. How? Around me, only the impassive shelves, the weak lights. The voice, low and rough, repeated my name, then fell silent. Who's there? My question hung unanswered in the dead air. Towards the sound's origin, I crept. Another table, identical to the first, materialized from the shadows. The manuscript, it was gone from under my arm. My hand felt empty. I spun. There on the table lay the volume, open, but I had carried it. Somehow, I approached cautiously. The ink on the exposed page seemed faded, the script tight, slanted, impenetrable. My finger traced a line. The parchment felt warm, leaving a faint, dusty residue on my skin. The muffled giggle returned, a fleeting breath of sound. I slammed the cover shut, shoving the book away with a surge of revulsion. The scraping erupted again, louder, nearer. Behind me, a shelf slid ponderously across the aisle, sealing the path. Another advance from the front, boxing me in. Escape routes vanished. To the left, a narrow gap remained. I squeezed through scant seconds before it closed, finding myself in a small reading alcove. A single chair, a low table, a lamp stubbornly fixed in the on position. The bulb radiated heat. I snatched my hand back from its surface. Slow breaths. Calm. Find calm. My name whispered again from just beyond the shelves to my left. Rising, holding my breath, I moved towards it. Between the towering stacks, a shape coalesced. Tall, slender, indistinct in the poor light. It tilted its head, observing. Before I could speak, it retreated, melting into the deeper darkness. I reached a spot. No gap, no passage, just solid shelving. I just want to leave, I pleaded aloud, my voice trembling. I'm sorry if I disturbed anything. I won't take the manuscript. Silence was my only reply. Then, the sound of nails, scratching rhythmically on the floorboards, chillingly close. My hand closed around the weighty spine of a nearby dictionary, a pathetic weapon against the unknown. My palm slicked with sweat. Inch by cautious inch, I moved, peering around corners. Every attempt towards where the exit should be was met by the groaning shift of shelves, the epileptic flicker of lights. Direction dissolved. I clung to small details. A tarnished brass plaque I recognized, passing for the third time. I reversed course. Minutes later, a different corner, a glass door bearing an unreadable sign. The handle felt loose. It turned. The door opened into a small, blessedly still office. Desk, green-shaded lamp, filing cabinet, empty drawers, save for paperclips, a desiccated pen. The telephone receiver offered only dead silence. Behind the desk, a window, painted shut, revealed nothing but impenetrable darkness outside. Perhaps the vague shapes of trees, solid frame. unbreakable. Leaving the office, I found myself in yet another corridor, this one straighter, offering a distant glimpse of something. Hope surged. I walked faster, footsteps echoing unnervingly. It led back, impossibly, to the main area. The circulation desk lamp glowed ahead, the entrance door visible beyond it. I broke into a run, shoes squeaking, not daring to look back. No scraping now, no laughter, no voice. The door, solid oak, familiar, stood closed, a thin line of light visible beneath it. The handle turned, but the door held fast. Locked. I threw my shoulder against it. The frame shuddered, but remained secured. Stepping back, breathless, the silence crashed down again, and then the voice directly behind me. I spun. 10 feet away, between shelves, the blurred shape lingered, head tilted. It retreated as I took an involuntary step forward. "What do you want?" I yelled, the sound raw. The shape vanished. Rubbing my face, teeth gritted, I turned back to the door. Fury and fear warred within me. I wrenched the handle, pulled, lifted. Nothing. Grabbing the heavy dictionary from a nearby display, I slammed it against the brass handle. A clang, a rattle. The door seemed to loosen fractionally. I tried the handle again. It gave. Pulling with all my strength, it opened an inch, then two. Wedging my foot in the gap, I pried, strained, until the opening was just wide enough. I forced my shoulder through, squeezed past the resisting wood. I stumbled into the main building hallway. Tiled floor, steady fluorescent lights, the mundane smell of old polish. Behind me, the library door clicked shut. I tried the handle from this side, locked solid. Through its small glass panel, the interior looked utterly normal. Shelves aligned, desk empty, lights unwavering. No movement, no sound. Down the tiled corridor I walked, towards the large glass doors of the building's main entrance. They swung open easily to my touch. Outside, cool, damp air met my face. The sky remained a starless shroud, but a distant car broke the pre-dawn quiet. I stood there, gasping, muscles aching, shirt clinging to my back. My name, whispered in that dry, ancient voice, echoed in my skull. What had happened in that place? The question felt vast and terrifying, but for now, unimportant. Escape was enough. I took a step, then another, away from the silent edifice. The old library stood impassive, its windows dark voids, its great oak door shut fast. Ordinary, unremarkable. I saw nothing stir, heard nothing emanate from within. Turning my back, I walked towards the main gate, out into the empty street, and did not look back again. Silence had fallen, thick and final after the television's drone, when the first faint percussion began. It emanated from the wall behind the sofa in my living room. Not loud, no, but insistent. A rhythmic thump, thump, thump against the plaster. A cold knot tightened in my gut. Rising, drawn by an unease I couldn't name, I crossed the room. My ear pressed flat against the cool, painted surface. I listened. The tapping persisted, steady, soft. Hesitantly, I rapped back, a light echo of the sound. Silence bloomed, brief and brittle, before the rhythm resumed, a distinct, deliberate answer. My pulse quickened, a frantic bird against my ribs. 3 years I'd inhabited these walls, steeped in their quietude, yet never had they offered such a cryptic pulse. For a long moment I stood frozen, mind racing through mundane explanations, pipes groaning their hydraulic sighs, loose conduits rattling within the lath, an animal, perhaps, frantic behind the plaster, but the cadence was wrong, too measured, too eerily akin to a human knuckle striking wood. Shoving the heavy sofa aside, I ran my hands over the wall, pressing, searching for weakness, for cracks or voids. Nothing yielded. The surface remained smooth, impassive. Over the ensuing days, the phenomenon became a fixture of the encroaching night. Always nocturnal, never during the sunlit hours, or at least, never perceived then. I took to sleeping on the sofa, a sentinel awaiting the soft metronomic summons that invariably arrived near the 11th hour. Each night, I'd lean closer, straining to pinpoint the exact locus of the sound. It seemed to originate high on the wall, near the juncture with the ceiling. An attic space. Impossible. Only the shallow pitch of the roof lay above that section of the house. Trying to dismiss it proved futile. Each tap resonated within me, slicking my palms with sweat, parching my throat with a nameless dread. A week drifted by, measured in sleepless nights and anxious dawns, until desperation drove me to the house's history. The sheaf of blueprints tucked away in a closet box since the purchase. Unfurled across the kitchen table, the aged paper crackled, revealing the familiar geography of my home. Living room, kitchen, bedchamber, bath, the connecting artery of the hall. Everything corresponded to the reality I knew. Yet, nestled within the older schematics, dated half a century prior, lay an anomaly. A small, rectangular void sketched behind the living room wall, complete with the ghost of a narrow doorway. The newer documents, however, were oblivious, depicting only unbroken space, a phantom limb on the house's architectural body. I stared, tracing the lines again and again. The listed dimensions, the tangible reality I occupied, didn't quite align with the spectral chamber erased from later records. A chill deeper than the night air traced my spine, sealed off during some forgotten renovation. Perhaps, but the why echoed unanswered, unsettling. Clutching the blueprints like a talisman, I returned to the living room, pressing the paper against the suspect wall. The tapping was absent now, yet the location felt imprinted on my senses, high up, where plaster met ceiling. If the old map held true. From the garage, I fetched a flashlight and a stepladder. Ascending, I rapped gently near the ceiling. One section responded with a hollow resonance, a subtle give beneath my knuckles, like improperly secured timber. Heart hammering a frantic counterpoint against my ribs, chest constricting. I retrieved a small hammer and a flat pry bar. Back on the ladder, nerves frayed, I attacked the plaster. Dust rained down, a gritty veil stinging my eyes. Wiping my face clear on my sleeve, I aimed the flashlight's beam into the breach. Beyond the splintered plaster and fractured lath, a wooden beam emerged, then older boards. A stale, desiccated air sighed outwards. As the opening widened, the unmistakable edge of a doorframe materialized. Narrow, dark-grained, ancient wood deliberately obscured. My fingers brushed against a small, cool knob. It turned with surprising ease, yet the door resisted, blocked from within. With the pry bar, I wrestled the obstructing planks free, muscles straining. Finally, after minutes of struggle, the narrow door swung silently inward on unseen hinges. Boosting myself higher, I thrust my head and shoulders through the aperture, the flashlight slicing through the gloom. A compact chamber revealed itself, perhaps 8 feet square, utterly barren save for a solitary object against the far wall. Walls of rough-hewn timber rose to meet a low ceiling that pressed close. No windows, no vents, no discernible wiring pierced the suffocating dark. Yet, mounted on a small metal bracket fixed to the wood, a single candle burned, its flame unwavering, serene. An impossible light in the windowless void. Cold air, heavy with the scent of must and ages, brushed my face. The silence was profound, absolute. The tapping had ceased. Swallowing against the dryness in my throat, I levered myself fully into the cramped space. Standing room, just barely. The candle, the sole illumination now, cast dancing shadows. Beside it, another presence, a painting. My breath hitched, lodging painfully in my chest. The painting depicted me. My own face stared back, but contorted into a grotesque, impossible rictus. The eyes wide and staring, the mouth stretched into a manic crescent far beyond mirth or muscle. Undeniably me, clad in the very gray t-shirt and jeans I wore at that moment. A wave of heat washed over me, sweat prickling my skin as my chest tightened into a vice. My legs felt like leaden weights as I drew closer, hands trembling uncontrollably. My own breathing rasped, shallow and swift, in the suffocating stillness. The paint appeared unnervingly fresh, the brushstrokes smooth, deliberate. Reaching out, my fingertip grazed the rough, dry wood of the frame. The candlelight flickered across the painted surface, seeming to animate the ghastly smile. Did it move? Or was it merely the play of light on the varnished horror? I snatched my hand back as if burned. My gaze shifted to the candle, thick, white, impossibly consuming no wax despite its steady burn. The flame glowed bright, yet holding my hand above it revealed only a gentle warmth, not the searing heat expected. Trembling, I attempted to pinch the wick between my fingers. My fingertips met around the flame, feeling the warmth intensify, but suffering no injury. The light persisted, inviolate. A sharp exhalation of breath caused it to dance momentarily before resuming its placid, unwavering vigil. A step back, then another, until my shoulders met the unyielding timber behind me. My heart pounded a frantic tattoo against my ribs, echoing in my ears. A desperate urge to flee warred with a morbid need to comprehend. The painting held me captive. My face, my shirt, that soul-chilling grin. Leaning in again, compelled, I scrutinized the details. The glassy, wet sheen of the painted eyes, the bared teeth in that strained rictus suggesting not joy, but excruciating tension. It felt sentient, its gaze locked onto mine, judging, possessing. Turning, I paced the confines of the cell-like room, tapping the solid walls, running palms over the aged wood. Nothing. No hidden panels, no ventilation, only the open doorway, back to my own world, framing the ragged hole in the ceiling. My living room lights were extinguished. Only the flashlight's beam and the candle's eerie glow pierced the twin darknesses. A profound sense of transgression washed over me, a nausea churning low in my stomach. My lips felt cracked, papery dry. The painting, it had to come out. It felt intrinsically wrong here, a violation. Approaching it once more, I grasped the frame with both hands and lifted. It detached easily from the wall, revealing only bare wood beneath. Clasping it to my chest, I navigated back towards the opening. It seemed to possess an unusual heft, a subtle resistance beyond its physical weight, dragging at me. Legs shaking, I descended the ladder, careful, deliberate, the painted eyes seeming to bore into my back. Back in the familiar space of my living room, I leaned the portrait against the wall, bathing it first in the flashlight's glare, then in the warmer glow of a corner lamp. The image remained unchanged. My face, frozen in that rictus of forced, unnatural glee. Instinctively, my hand flew to my own face, smooth, unsmiling. No signature adorned the canvas, no clue to its creator. Just me, in my current attire, immortalized in that moment of discovery. Rationality scrabbled for purchase, a desperate clawing at the edges of the impossible. A prank? Elaborate, certainly, but conceivable. Left by a previous occupant? Perhaps. But the synchronicity, the clothes, the timing, and the candle, defying physics with its perpetual, heatless flame. My pacing grew frantic, breath coming in ragged bursts. Each glance at the painting sent a fresh wave of revulsion through me, a visceral recoil. Up the ladder again, one last look into the unsettling chamber. The candle still burned, its flame now flickering slightly, disturbed perhaps by the draught from the open portal. The room felt emptier, colder, without the painting's disturbing presence. The tapping remained absent. A quick sweep with the flashlight confirmed its stark vacancy. I tried the candle holder again. It remained fixed, immovable. The flame itself yielded nothing to my touch but warmth. Defeated, driven now by an urgent need to conceal, to undo, I retreated. Back down, I retrieved the dislodged boards, wedging them back into place as best I could. Nails secured a few. A spare piece of drywall from the garage served as a temporary patch over the wound in the ceiling. Plastering, painting, tasks for later. For now, containment was paramount. Descending, my eyes fell upon the painting, now leaning innocuously against the wall, its back turned. That grin, unseen, still clawed at my nerves. I carried it, heavy with unspoken meaning, towards the hall closet. Hesitation gripped me. Should I destroy it? Discard it? Would that invite some unknown retribution? Uncertain, paralyzed by the unknown, I shoved it behind a stack of boxes, a hidden shame, and pulled the door shut. Back on the sofa, I listened. Silence reigned, profound, broken only by the refrigerator's low hum and the house's nocturnal settling sighs. Yet tranquility remained elusive. My palms remained slick, my jaw clenched tight against an unseen pressure. Sleep was impossible. Closing my eyes conjured only the painted leer, burned onto my retinas. Dawn broke, gray and indifferent. A morbid compulsion drew me to the closet. Peeking behind the boxes, I saw the painting rested undisturbed, its grotesque smile unchanged, eternally fixed. I shut the door firmly, retreating. Later, I told myself, scrubbing my face raw in the bathroom mirror, seeing only tired, red-rimmed eyes staring back. I would dispose of it later. I would forget the room, the candle, the impossible flame burning steadfastly in the sealed darkness just beyond the patched ceiling. But the knowledge remained, a cold certainty lodged deep within, a parasite in my peace. It was still there, burning, waiting. 」 « 「」 « 」 « 」 « 」 « 」 « 」 « 」 « 」 « 」 « 」 « 」 « 」 « 」 « 」 « 」 « 」 « 」 « 」 « 」 « 」 « 」 « 」 « 」 « 」 « 」 « 」 « 」 « 」 « sputtering neon painted the filmed glass in washes of sickly green light. 2 a.m, hours now. That obsidian sedan had squatted curbside, engine a low thrum beneath the rain's soft percussion. Windows, black mirrors reflecting nothing but the bleary street lights. A wrong note in the night's quiet symphony, a dissonance growing sharper with every tick of the cheap plastic clock above the cigarettes. 6 months, Elias had been swallowing the graveyard hours at this fluorescent box, the quick and easy, enough to keep the lights on back home. Usually just the drone of the coolers, the slap of the mop, the occasional ghost-eyed trucker chasing coffee. Tonight, though, the ordinary had curdled. The car arrived near 11, a shard of polished darkness incongruous against the neighborhood's decay. Lost, stranded, plausible theories withered as midnight bled into the deeper hours. Disquiet coiled in his gut. Then the sky wept, a persistent drizzle blurring the sedan's sharp edges into something indistinct, dreamlike. 1:30. The urge to know became an itch. Feigning a need to wrestle the overflowing bins, Elias pushed through the door. The air, damp and cool, kissed his face. A momentary reprieve from the stale, recycled breath of the store. A performance of civic duty. Rattling lids, eyes darting sideways. The windows remained impenetrable voids, but turning back, a flicker, swift, undeniable, behind the smoked glass. Occupied. Sanctuary found behind the scratched Formica counter. Call dispatch. Report. What? Loitering chrome. Absurd. Wait. His shift bled out at dawn. Surely it would vanish by then. 2:30 shattered that fragile hope. A door clicked open, disgorging a figure into the sodium-lit drizzle. He moved with a jerky, frantic energy, carving short paths beside the car, hands raking through unseen tangles in his hair, lips moving soundlessly. Then, a sharp pivot, a beeline for the entrance. A frantic drumbeat started against Elias's ribs. Every instinct screamed red alert. Closer now, his eyes were feral, darting, consuming the space. Fabric hung off him, creased and lived in. A subtle palsy jittered his fingers. The bell above the door chimed, a startlingly bright sound in the pregnant silence. He paused, a predator assessing territory, before those restless eyes snagged on Elias. "All right?" Elias's voice, thinner than he liked. "Anything I can get for you?" Silence stretched, taut. He drifted towards the counter, a derelict ship breaching harbor. "Watched," he rasped, the word less a question than a statement scraped raw. "Ever get that feeling? Truly watched?" Elias swallowed against a suddenly dry throat. Part of the job, maybe? A weak deflection. He leaned across the counter, invading Elias's space. The air thickened with stale perspiration and an unidentifiable metallic tang. "Not the cameras, kid. Eyes. Everywhere. Seeing it all." An involuntary retreat, a small shuffle backward. "Look, friend, you seem stressed. Can I ring someone?" A laugh cracked from him, brittle as shattered glass. "Ring who? They're woven into the fabric. All of them." Elias's fingers found the cool plastic lip of the silent alarm beneath the counter, never used. Tonight felt different. "What is it?" he ventured. aiming for calm neutrality. "What's happening?" His eyes narrowed to slits. "Help?" A sneer twisted his lips. He fumbled inside his worn jacket. A breathless second where Elias pictured steel, but produced only a brutally creased sheet of paper. He slapped it flat on the counter. A frantic constellation of ink. Arrows, circles, names. Frantic scrawl. "See?" His finger stabbed violently. "The whole damn lattice. FedGov, the money men, the goddamn barometric pressure. Pulling the strings. We're just marionettes dancing in their storm." Elias offered a slow nod, gaze locked on his agitated form. "Sounds intense." "Intense?" His voice climbed, cracking. "It's annihilation. Do you grasp the scale? What they'll do to bury the truth?" He was nearly bellowing now, flecks of saliva escaping his lips, his face suffused with blood. Elias's eyes flicked to the door, praying for headlights, footsteps, anything. Only rain-streaked emptiness answered. "Sir," he managed, voice firmer than he felt. "You need to lower your voice. You're upsetting me." He blinked, momentarily adrift, as if surfacing from deep water. Then the hardness returned, flinty. "Upset? Good. Fear is rational. They could have this place wired." He resumed his restless pacing, a caged animal muttering dark litanies. Elias tracked him, his palm damp against the counter, hovering near the button. Press it and risk. What? Better to ride the wave. Abruptly, he stopped, fixing Elias with that unnerving stare. "Need provisions," he declared flatly. "Sustenance, power cells, water, enough for the long haul." A strange sense of relief washed over Elias. A task, something concrete. "Right. Okay. Basket's over there. Let's get you sorted." As they navigated the brightly lit aisles, a surreal journey through processed foods and bottled liquids, his monologue continued. A torrent of interwoven conspiracies. Elias murmured affirmations, empty sounds meant to soothe, eyes constantly seeking a path back to the relative safety of the register. Back at the counter, the scanner beeped its mundane rhythm beneath the weight of his paranoia. As Elias worked, he leaned in again, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "You've got clear eyes, kid. Still clean. Need to vanish. Before they tag you. Find a deep shadow. Unplug completely." A tremor ran through Elias's own hands as he packed cans and batteries into flimsy plastic bags. His proximity was a physical pressure. 7850, he choked out. He produced a thick, abused roll of currency, peeling off notes that felt strangely warm. Counting the change, Elias saw his own hands weren't steady. As he offered the coins, he waved them away. "Hold onto it. Currency for the coming days." A final, oblique pronouncement. He hefted the bags, turned, and walked out into the rain-slicked night. Elias's pulse hammered against his ears. Reaching the obsidian sedan, he paused, casting one last look back towards the fluorescent island of the store. Through the glass, their gazes locked for a pregnant second. Something flickered there. Raw terror, perhaps, or the hollow ache of utter despair. Then he slipped inside. The engine snarled, tires screamed on wet asphalt, and he was swallowed by the darkness. Silence rushed back in, leaving Elias adrift in the sudden emptiness of the parking lot, the strange transaction echoing in the sterile air. The remaining hours dissolved into a jittery haze. Each chime of the door sent a jolt through him, but only the usual pre-dawn phantoms materialized. Weary shift workers seeking caffeine, delivery guys replenishing routes. When relief arrived with the gray smear of dawn, Elias held his tongue. Recounting it felt foolish. The stark fluorescent lights seemed to bleach the encounter of its menace, reducing it to a mere anecdote about a disturbed customer. Maybe that's all it was. Yet, stepping out into the cool, rinsed air of morning, a profound shift resonated within him. The familiar streetscape seemed subtly altered, as if overlaid with a transparent film of suspicion. A veil thinned, revealing unsettling possibilities in the mundane. The walk home was slow, each step echoing the man's parting words. Before they tag you. Absurd. The fevered imaginings of a broken mind. Still, climbing the worn steps to his apartment, an involuntary glance backward scanned the street below, half expecting to find polished darkness idling at the curb. That night was a fracture point. Elias left the quick and easy soon after, citing burnout. The truth lay deeper, in the way his eyes perpetually scanned the lot during those final graveyard shifts, coiled tight, waiting, sometimes adrift in the quiet hum of the city night. The question still surfaces, cold and sharp. What if the madness held a splinter of truth? What happens when the paranoia starts to sing a siren song you almost recognize? Behind the polished wood of the gilded flask, my patrons know me by the drinks I slide before them, often anticipating the unspoken order. It's a life lived in rhythms, in observed habits. Silas, always a dark ale sharp at 5. Clara, her Thursday martini demanding the ghost of vermouth, nothing more. Finn, nursing espresso until 8, then the clean fizz of soda water. Recognizing the cadence keeps the bar smooth. It's also what keeps me safe, which is why the persistent white van seeded such a deep unease. 3 weeks it had been since its first appearance, a stark shape against the familiar brickwork across the street during my afternoon shift. The driver, nondescript, middle-aged, beneath a generic baseball cap, had ambled in, inquiring about my car. The gray sedan tucked away in the employee spaces, claimed he drove the same model, wondered aloud about transmission quirks, a query veiled in mundane coincidence, easily dismissed then. But 2 days later, the van materialized outside the supermarket, 5 miles distant. Different time, different context, same man emerging with the same feigned interest in my vehicle. A cold ripple traced my spine as he intercepted me in the echoing car park, a smile stretched thin across his face. "Fancy seeing you," he'd murmured, falling into step beside my rattling trolley. "Meant to ask, that steering column ever give you trouble? Mine's making this awful racket." My replies were clipped, borders drawn clearly in my tone, yet he persisted, a low drone of automotive chatter following me clear to my sedan. He stood too near as I loaded bags, his presence a palpable pressure. Only the passing shadow of another shopper finally made him retreat, melting back towards his van with a wave that churned my stomach. The following week became a map of his appearances, idling near my gym, parked down the block from the cafe, where Chloe and I shared Sunday rituals, lurking in the vast lot of the crosstown cinema. Each time, the script replayed, the spotting, the approach, the car talk, the lingering that frayed my nerves thin. I began weaving unpredictability into my days, new routes to the flask, different grocery aisles, erratic gym visits. Still, he found me. The white van would bloom suddenly in my rearview mirror, or sit waiting, sentinel-like, in parking lots, as if privy to my own shifting intentions. Tonight was different, a private affair, bartending a birthday celebration out in the sprawling quiet of the suburbs. Good pay, familiar territory. Yet, pulling onto the residential street, my breath hitched. Half a block down, stark under a lone streetlight, sat the van. My fingers trembled, fumbling with my phone, tapping out a message to Chloe. White van here, private gig. How? Her reply flashed back instantly. Stay locked inside. Call 911 now. Before the numbers were even dialed, a soft rap sounded on my driver's side window. I jolted, phone nearly skittering from my grasp. It was Eleanor, the party's host, smiling, ready to help unload. Stepping out, I forced a semblance of calm, the words tumbling out, about the van, the man, the relentless, unnerving pursuit. Eleanor's welcoming expression dissolved, replaced by a sharp concern. That thing, it's been sitting there since mid-afternoon, she murmured, brow furrowed. Figured it was for the Johnson house, carpet cleaning, but they finished hours ago. We ferried my gear swiftly into a garage, Eleanor already dialing the police, her voice firm. While we waited, she quietly summoned her husband, David, and a few early arrivals, forming a small protective cluster to escort me indoors. From the periphery of my vision, I caught movement inside the van, a silhouette shifting, watching, but the door remained closed. 2 officers materialized within minutes, their car bathing the quiet street in brief pulses of red and blue. They moved towards the van as I watched, heart hammering against my ribs from the sanctuary of Eleanor's living room window. The driver emerged, hands gesturing with an agitated energy as he spoke. Even from this distance, the flush coloring his face was visible. Anger, perhaps, or the heat of exposure. One officer peeled away, coming to the house to take my account, while the other remained with the man. I recounted everything, each unsettling encounter, the disparate locations, the bizarre, recurring questions about my gray sedan. The officer's face grew taut, her pen scratching rapidly across the notepad. Stay inside, she advised, her gaze steady. We need to have a thorough conversation with your admirer. She paused at the door. And Mom, might be wise to have someone check under your car. These types, sometimes they plant trackers. A wave of nausea crested. All that talk about transmissions and steering columns. Not idle chatter, but reconnaissance. Maybe even a pretext to tamper. Eleanor, without hesitation, began sending cancellation texts, apologies flowing to her would-be guests. David, revealing a past life as a mechanic, offered to inspect my car then and there, in the relative safety of their driveway. As he slid underneath with a bright torch, I stood numbly, wrapped in a blanket Eleanor had pressed upon me, watching the continued roadside discussion between the police and the man from the van. Got something, David's voice echoed, muffled, from beneath the chassis. The officer, taking my statement, hastened over. Moments later, she was carefully bagging a small, dark object, evidence. The subsequent hours dissolved into a disorienting sequence of statements, forms, procedural calm. The driver of the white van was guided into the back of a patrol car and driven away. A search of his vehicle yielded more tracking devices, unsettlingly paired with photographs of other women's cars. Mine was not the first life he had shadowed. A detective explained the man's nomadic pattern of obsession, a history stretching across state lines. He'd operate just shy of blatant illegality, moving on when scrutiny intensified, seeking fresh targets in unfamiliar towns. They'd been aware of him, peripherally, but he'd stayed elusive until tonight. Days bleed into weeks. Every white van glimpsed in traffic sends a jolt through me. My rearview mirror is a constant scan. The Gilded Flask now has cameras monitoring the employee spaces. Chloe gifted me a personal alarm, loud enough to pierce complacency. Eleanor and David insist on seeing me to my car after every private function I now cautiously accept. On Sunday afternoons, when the flask lies dormant, I host self-defense workshops in the main room. Women arrive from across the city, sharing knowledge, experiences, bolstering each other's resolve. Some speak of unnerving encounters with a white van, near misses I hadn't known existed. Slowly, deliberately, I'm stitching my routine back together, but the weave is different now, stronger, more alert. My routes home are intentionally random. I park beneath the sodium glare of streetlights. Regular checks beneath my car are part of the closing ritual. Paranoia, some might whisper. Preparation, I call it. One constant remains. I still know, instinctively, what each regular at the Gilded Flask will order. But my gaze catches other patterns now. The patron whose attention lingers too long on the servers. The one asking questions that probe too deep. The eyes that follow women with unnerving focus. The regulars see it too. An unspoken network hums beneath the chatter and clinking glass. Last week, a young woman hurried in, breathless, describing a car that had tailed her for blocks. Before her story was fully told, 3 familiar faces had offered to walk her out, and another was already murmuring into his phone to a contact at the precinct. We watch now, collectively. Sometimes a white van still flickers in my mirror, and my pulse leaps, but the fear no longer paralyzes. It's tempered by the knowledge that I'm not isolated in my vigilance. A community stands sentinel beside me, just as I stand for them. We've reshaped a narrative of fear into one of shared strength, a pattern I embrace with fierce pride. The reflection snagged my attention first, a flicker in the driver's overhead mirror. Then, the eyes, lidded, lost in the cavern of a dark hood, yet their focus felt like a physical pressure against my skin. A cold dread, ancient and instinctual, coiled low in my gut. This voyage through the ink-black hours would not be commonplace. It was already etching itself onto my nerves. I hadn't grasped then, of course, the true destination, the ragged precipice of my own reason. My name is Ilara. I navigate the labyrinthine world of postgraduate studies at the City University. This particular night found me returning campusward, retreating from the brief solace of a weekend parental visit. 4 hours stretched between departure and arrival, a distance I'd elected to traverse via the nocturnal coach service, a concession to a perpetually lean wallet, an ill-fated economy. The bus sighed, opened its doors to reveal a sparsely populated belly. A few solitary souls drifted in the dim fluorescence. I claimed a seat mid-coach, nestling into the worn upholstery, bracing for a passage I prayed would dissolve into unremarkable sleep. As the vehicle rumbled away from the terminal's sodium glow, my gaze drifted towards the rear. He was there, a silhouette subsumed by shadow and a dark, hooded sweatshirt occupying the rearmost bench, anonymity itself. Initially, a fleeting thought, just another traveler swallowed by the night. But as the asphalt ribbon unspooled beneath us, and one by one, the other passengers disembarked into unseen towns, dissolving like phantoms, a stark awareness crystallized. Only 3 remained. The driver, a vague shape beyond the partition, myself, and the hooded stillness at the back. It began subtly, a prickle across the nape of my neck, the unmistakable psychic weight of observation. Paranoia, I chided myself, a familiar phantom conjured by exhaustion and solitude. Yet, each furtive glance into the mirror above the driver confirmed it. Those eyes. Obscured by distance and the gloom, his features remained indistinct, yet the sheer unblinking intensity of his stare was a palpable thing. It didn't shift, didn't falter. Twin embers glowing dimly in the manufactured twilight, fixed inexorably upon me. I forced my attention outward towards the window, seeking distraction. Only my own haunted reflection stared back, superimposed on the rushing void. The monotonous thrum of the engine, the rhythmic jostle over uneven pavement. These sparse sounds were swallowed by the profound, unnerving quiet. An eternity seemed to crawl by before resolve hardened within me. I had to sever this unnerving visual tether. Gathering my bag with trembling hands, I relocated, choosing a seat nearer the front, deliberately keeping my back to the rear, my gaze locked forward. A fragile moment of respite settled over me. Then, peripheral motion snagged my awareness, a shift in the dimness behind. He, too, had moved. The hooded shape now occupied a seat, maintaining the precise distance that had separated us before. A cold fist clenched around my heart. Coincidence strained credulity. Urgency fled. Demand the driver stop. Let me out, anywhere. But the windows revealed only an unbroken expanse of rural darkness. The prospect of being marooned on this desolate highway felt exponentially more terrifying than remaining aboard this moving prison. My fingers scrabbled for my phone. A lifeline. Useless. No signal bars illuminated the screen. We were traversing a dead zone, a pocket of disconnection from the known world. The subsequent hour became a monument to stretched time. I sat bolt upright, muscles screaming with tension, ears straining against the engine's drone for any betraying sound from behind. Once, twice, I thought I detected the whisper-soft scuff of a footstep on the aisle carpet. Each time, a panicked swivel of my head revealed only the static figure. Those unwavering eyes still latched onto me. As the first tentative glimmers of suburban sprawl appeared on the horizon, a cautious tendril of relief began to unfurl within me. Nearly there, safety was imminent. And then, the world stuttered. The bus gave a violent heave, the engine choking, sputtering into silence. We coasted to a halt on the road's shoulder. the interior lights flickering with manic energy before plunging us into absolute darkness. "Apologies, folks," the driver's voice boomed, startlingly loud in the sudden vacuum of sound. "Engines decided to pack it in. Sit tight, I'll have a look." A scream clawed at my throat, desperate to warn him, to plead with him not to leave me, to tell him about the watcher in the back. But the sound died, trapped behind a wall of fear. Powerless, I watched his silhouette descend the steps and vanish into the night. Alone. The mirror was useless now in the pitch black, but his presence was a suffocating weight, a palpable miasma of menace. Silence descended, thick and absolute, broken only by the ragged, frantic rhythm of my own breathing. Then I heard it, unmistakable. Soft, deliberate footfalls ascending the aisle. Step, pause, step. Panic detonated within me. Pure, adrenalized flight. Thought abandoned, I launched myself from the seat, stumbling blindly towards the front. My hand, slick with sweat, fumbled with the door lever. It resisted, then gave with a pneumatic hiss. I spilled out onto the tarmac, the cool night air a shocking slap against my overheated skin. The driver, gone, vanished. Had it been moments since he left? Or an age? Time had warped, become elastic and meaningless. Instinct took over. I ran, feet hammering the asphalt, propelling me away from the darkened husk of the bus, directionless, driven only by the primal need for distance. Behind me, the distinct sound of the bus door groaning open again. He was following. My lungs burned, muscles screamed protest, but I pushed harder, faster than I thought possible. Yet, the footsteps echoed behind me, unnervingly steady, relentless, gaining no ground, but losing none. Just as exhaustion threatened to buckle my knees, a beacon flared ahead, the artificial glare of a gas station, a fluorescent island in the sea of night. Hope surged, lending wings to my failing legs. I burst through the glass doors, colliding with the startled gaze of a drowsy attendant behind the counter. "Help!" I choked out, words torn from my raw throat. "Please, someone's after me." His eyes widened, taking in my wild eyes, my disheveled state. He reached for the phone beside the register, already punching numbers. "What's wrong? Who is it?" I spun, arm outstretched, to point back down the desolate road, to show him the source of my terror. My blood turned to ice water. Nothing. The highway stretched away, utterly empty, swallowed by darkness in both directions. The arrival of the police cruiser, its flashing lights painting the scene in strobes of red and blue, brought little comfort, only more questions that frayed my already shattered nerves. They found no trace of a hooded figure, no corroborating evidence of my flight or pursuit. The bus sat dormant where we'd left it, the driver underneath, wrestling with the engine, oblivious to the nightmare that had unfolded within its metal shell. As the adrenaline ebbed, insidious doubt crept into the vacuum it left. Had I conjured him from the ether of stress and sleeplessness, a hallucination born of academic pressure? Yet, even as my rational mind scrabbled for explanations, the chilling memory of those eyes persisted, that unwavering, predatory gaze that had pinned me across the dark miles. Real or imagined, the terror had been utterly, devastatingly authentic. The officers offered a ride back to campus, a gesture I accepted with numb gratitude. Driving away from the lonely outpost of light, I risked a final glance backward, and for a heart-stopping instant, I thought I saw him, a dark, hooded shape, lingering just at the edge of the gas station's glow, watching me depart. The night bus became a forbidden passage after that. Weeks bled into months, marked by residual hypervigilance. Shadows laped with imagined life. Solitude in public spaces felt fraught with potential menace. Concerned friends and family murmured suggestions of therapy, medication, framing my experience as an anxiety attack writ large. But I carried the certainty of it within me, an inexplicable truth. Some darknesses harbor entities that defy easy categorization, and sometimes they choose public transport, silent companions awaiting the unwary. To this day, the sight of a hooded sweatshirt triggers a spike in my pulse. I avoid nocturnal journeys, preferring the candid light of day, and occasionally, lost in a crowd, that familiar chilling prickle returns to the back of my neck. A swift turn always reveals nothing. Yet, a deep, unshakable conviction remains. Somewhere, out there in the vast indifference, those eyes are still watching, perhaps waiting for our paths to converge once more. So, should you find yourself adrift on a near-deserted coach in the dead hours, and the ghost of a feeling whispers that you are not entirely alone, heed that instinct. Trust the tremor of fear, because the monsters we dismiss as figments are not always confined to the imagination. Sometimes they are seated just behind you, cloaked in plain sight, patiently observing, waiting for the opportune moment. As for me, I'll stay grounded in the daylight. Certain journeys carry a toll too steep to contemplate, for one never truly knows who or what might be sharing the ride. My headlamp's beam sliced a hesitant blade into the earth's gullet, illuminating a constricted passage that plunged into geological night. Air thick as velvet hung heavy, scented with powdered stone and the decaying perfume of secrets left to molder. A breath drawn deep did little to steady the frantic drummer in my chest. This was the place of whispers, the fabled copper lode swallowed by time, untouched for generations. We stood at its threshold, yet, as the encroaching silence would soon attest, some voids are best left unfilled. Elias, are you truly set on this? Clara's voice, a fragile echo against the weeping stone, carried both the thrill of the forbidden and a tremor of deep unease. I pivoted, the cone of light washing over my companions, Clara, Ronan, Lena, their faces starkly pale under the electric glare, bore the twin masks of apprehension and the fine patina of subterranean dust that coated everything living or inert. Friends, come now, I urged, forcing a buoyancy I scarcely felt. Months we've charted this course, to falter at the very door. Truth be told, a cold serpent coiled in my own gut. We were seasoned trekkers, yes, but novices in the art of burrowing, mere spelunking dilettantes. The mine shaft itself, a jagged moor veiled by tenacious greenery, existed on no map we possessed. Serendipity, or perhaps a darker providence had guided our boots to its lip. Ronan, ever the anchor of practicality in our quartet, shifted his weight. I don't like the feel of it, Elias. The structure. It seems precarious. Shouldn't we report this? Let the experts assess. A shake of my head. And forfeit the discovery. Relinquish the glory. Never. We unearthed this vein of history. The first exploration belongs to us. Lena, typically the most circumspect among us, surprised me with a decisive nod. Elias speaks truth. An opportunity like this, it won't knock twice. I vote we proceed. Clara's uncertainty lingered in her eyes, but after a moment's internal debate, her shoulders squared. Very well, but we remain tethered, understand? No solo ventures into the shadows. Accord reached, our descent commenced. The tunnel angled downwards, its flanks shored up by ancient timbers, skeletal ribs of the passage that groaned under the immense pressure of the mountain as we passed. Our headlamps threw elongated, capering silhouettes onto the rock, specters mocking our trespass into this long dormant realm. Deeper still, vestiges of the mine's industrious past materialized, corroded pickaxes and shovels half buried in debris, the skeletal remains of ore carts, wheels seized solid by a century's rust. Astounding, Lena breathed, her archaeologist's gaze consuming every nuance. It's akin to stepping through a tear in time. I could only concur. Beneath the crushing weight of darkness, despite the insistent thrumming intuition that we were violating sacred ground, a current of pure discovery surged through me. We were the first souls in 100 years to witness these relics. Perhaps an hour into our subterranean pilgrimage, the passage bifurcated, two tenebrous maws yawning before us, offering no hint of their destinations. Which path? Clara queried, sweeping her light from one void to the other. I consulted the brittle map procured from the town archives, faded, fractured, its ink barely clinging to the parchment, yet our sole navigator. After a moment's scrutiny, my finger traced the leftward tunnel. This route, if my interpretation holds, it should guide us toward the primary excavation cavern. We pressed onward, the tunnel constricted, the air growing denser, dust swirling like disturbed phantoms in our beams. Silence pressed in, immense and suffocating, punctuated only by the crunch of our boots on the gritty floor and the sporadic, unnerving drip of unseen water. Abruptly, Ronan halted, so suddenly that Lena collided softly with his back. "Did you perceive that?" His voice was a strained whisper. We froze, ears straining against the profound quiet. For a beat, only the frantic pulse in my own temples registered. Then, subtly, it reached me. A low, resonant vibration, like thunder brooding miles away. "Likely just air currents," I offered, the reassurance aimed as much at myself as at the others. "Forward. We must be nearing the heart of it." But the rumbling persisted, swelling from a subtle tremor to to a palpable growl. Tiny pebbles danced across the tunnel floor. A fine grit sifted down from the unseen ceiling. Elias, Clara's voice was taut, strung with rising fear. I strongly advocate turning back. I was poised to concede when the narrow passage abruptly disgorged us into a colossal chamber. Our lights strained, failing to find purchase on the distant walls or the vaulting roof above, creating the dizzying sensation of standing on the precipice of a lightless abyss. "This is it," I whispered, awestruck. The great cavern. As our vision adapted, shapes coalesced from the Stygian gloom. Mammoth, rust-eaten machinery loomed like dormant behemoths. Mounds of scree and rubble sculpted an alien topography. And there, catching my beam with a dull metallic luster, snaked a rich vein of copper ore embedded within the rock face. We had found it. The mother lode, the miner's elusive phantom. Our relation, however, proved tragically ephemeral. The rumbling, which had subsided into a background hum, abruptly escalated. The very rock beneath us began to heave. "Tremor," Ronan shouted, but a deeper dread told me this was no mere seismic shift. Decades of neglect, the crushing tonnage of the earth overhead, aggravated by our own intrusion. The mine, fragile and forsaken, was surrendering to gravity. It was coming down. "Move!" The command tore from my throat as I spun back toward the tunnel. We scrambled, plunged back into the passage we just exited, the subterranean thunder escalating to a deafening crescendo. Stone rained down, first pebbles, then fist-sized chunks, then larger missiles. I heard Lena cry out, a sharp gasp of pain as a rock glanced off her shoulder, but momentum was our only shield. We couldn't stop. The tunnel seemed to warp, twisting in configurations I didn't recall from our ingress. Had we missed a turning? The dust choked the air, rendering our headlamps near impotent, their beams fracturing the chaos into disorienting flashes as we fled. A particularly savage heave threw us from our feet. Struggling upright, a wave of horror washed over me. I couldn't see the others. "Clara, Ronan, Lena." My voice, raw from dust, cracked in the tumult. "Here," Clara's reply, faint, muffled. Guiding myself with a hand against the shuddering wall, I stumbled toward the sound. I found her helping Lena rise. Lena's face was a mask of grime and tears, one arm cradled protectively against her chest. "Ronan? Where is Ronan?" The question felt leaden, thick with foreboding. Clara shook her head, her eyes vast pools of terror. "I don't know. The fall? We were separated." Another violent shudder racked the tunnel, loosing a fresh hail of debris. Staying put meant burial. "Ronan!" I bellowed one final time, straining to hear any response above the mine's death rattle. Silence answered, save for the groaning rock. My heart a cold stone. I seized Clara's hand. "We have to go. Now!" We ran, half-blinded, stumbling through the disintegrating passage. Each footfall courted disaster. Each rumble threatened the final fatal cave-in. Just as my lungs burned and legs threatened to buckle, I saw it, a distant, ethereal glimmer of natural light, the way out. Summoning a final desperate surge of adrenaline, we sprinted towards it. Boulders crashed around us. The entire mountain seemed to groan in its terminal agony. We burst from the tunnel mouth into the blessedly open air and kept running, not daring to stop until we were yards clear of the entrance. Turning, we witnessed the hillside itself seem to convulse before collapsing inward, vomiting a colossal plume of ochre dust skyward. We stood, raggedly sucking air, coated in grime and slick with blood from countless minor lacerations, alive but profoundly fractured by the ordeal. "Ronan," Lena wept, clutching her injured arm. He's still in there." The brutal weight of our reality settled upon us. 4 souls had descended into that darkness, unified by the intoxicating lure of discovery. 3 stood now, battered and diminished. As the dust cloud began its slow descent, a sound pierced the stunned silence, jolting our hearts. Coughing, weak but distinct, emanating from the vicinity of the obliterated entrance. We rushed forward, hope a fragile, fluttering thing, and there, emerging from beneath the branches of a fallen tree that had miraculously formed a protective pocket amidst the devastation, was Ronan, caked in dust, blood trickling from a gash on his forehead, but undeniably, miraculously alive. We helped him stagger upright, the 4 of us bound in a silent communion of shock and overwhelming relief. We had survived, though survival had exacted its price. The mine, its coveted copper heart and shattered history, was irrevocably lost, entombed beneath unthinkable tons of rock and soil. As we limped back towards the world of the living, my thoughts drifted to the forgotten miners who had walked these tunnels before. How many ghosts did this mountain hold? How many had glimpsed that same metallic promise, pushed deeper into the danger, only to be consumed by the earth's indifferent hunger? Fortune had favored us, allowing us to escape with our lives, albeit scarred. Yet the passage through the earth's maw had irrevocably altered us. We sought adventure, perhaps riches, but unearthed instead a brutal lesson in the sublime indifference of nature and the stark fragility of our own existence. The lost copper mine would keep its secrets, buried now deeper than any map could fathom, and we, the interlopers who had dared rouse it from its slumber, would forever carry the tremulous weight of that knowledge. Some discoveries we now understood with chilling certainty are best left buried. Etched into memory is that Saturday morning, the house groaning under the weight of its own decay and my attempts at renewal. Sweat plastered my head to my temples. Dust, thick as velvet, coated every surface. I wrestled with splintered timbers, hauled generations of forgotten detritus to the dumpster, squatting outside, my muscles screaming dull protests against the strain. The blueprint, a crisp relic from previous occupants, showed a simple, honest structure. 1 floor, a modest attic accessible from the far end. No secrets promised on that paper, no anomalies charted, just walls, wires, and the predictable geometry of a small, aging home. Ascending the rickety stepladder in the hallway's gloom, peeling back a ragged curtain of plaster I'd scored earlier, my gaze snagged on it. There, nestled between joists, flush with the aged wood overhead, lay a door. Not the known attic access, the one with the folding stairs across the house, but something else entirely. A clandestine rectangle of wood, perhaps 2 feet by 3, stark against the lath and plaster. Time seemed to stutter. My breath caught. It wore its age plainly. Hinges speckled with rust. A simple, curved metal pull handle. The kind unseen in decades. An artifact misplaced in time, utterly absent from the schematics clutched in my memory. A wave of disorientation washed over me. My fingers traced the door's coarse grain. The metal handle felt cold, primitive beneath my touch. A tentative push yielded a faint groan, a gritty scrape against the ceiling timbers, then stillness. Nothing stirred above, only the expected emptiness of insulation and dormant wiring. Had the blueprints lied by omission? Had I simply missed this anomaly in my initial inspections? Curiosity, sharp and insistent, gnawed at me. Reaching up, I gripped the handle. Resistance met my pull, then a sharp crack, like desiccated paint surrendering its hold, and the panel yielded, swinging inward and upward into the darkness. A cascade of ancient dust rained down, stinging my eyes, filling my nostrils with the scent of decay. Through the haze, my work light sliced into blackness. An unfinished pocket of attic revealed. Bare joists webbed the space beneath a low-slung roof. Discolored, matted insulation slumped between them like something exhausted. The air hung thick, stagnant, smelling of time itself. A sealed vault's dead breath. No forgotten trunks, no discarded relics. Vacancy. Yet, a palpable tension vibrated in the stillness. The silence felt different, charged. My own breathing sounded loud, intrusive. The fine hairs on my neck lifted. A cold prickle danced across my forearms. The distinct, irrational certainty of being observed settled upon me, heavy as a shroud. My light beam swept frantically, chasing shadows, finding only emptiness. Retreating from the opening, I pulled the panel closed, its hinges emitting a dry squeal. Back on the floor, neck craned, I stared at the innocuous rectangle, now seamlessly part of the ceiling again. Rational thought, I commanded myself, the words feeling hollow. An old house harbors quirks, perhaps a forgotten access point, sealed decades ago, deemed irrelevant. A makeshift cubbyhole, undocumented, simple, plausible, yet the phantom weight of unseen eyes lingered, a cold counterpoint to logic. An unease, profound and unsettling, coiled in my gut. My shoulders remained tight knots. Why venture back? No reason. Why ignore it? Impossible. The compromise formed. Finish the wiring, patch the ceiling, bury the discovery, erase it. Work resumed, but focus fractured. Tools felt leaden in my grip. The ache in my back, a dull throb, mirroring the disquiet within. My gaze kept drifting upward, snagging on that patch of ceiling near the old hall closet, a space I'd passed countless times, utterly blind to its secret until now. Hours bled away. Wiring done, tools stowed, I forced down a tasteless lunch, scrolling absently through my phone, seeking distraction, but finding only the persistent echo of that hidden door. The house itself felt altered, its familiar silence now charged, expectant. The air hung heavy, motionless. Throwing open windows, offered little relief. Drawn back beneath the spot, I stared, half hoping it was a trick of light, a figment of fatigue. But the faint outline remained, stark and undeniable. Compelled by a need for certainty, or perhaps a fool's errand to dispel the unease, I retrieved the ladder. Again, the ascent. Again, the creak of the hinges. Flashlight held like a weapon, I probed the void methodically. Light crawled over dusty joists, clumped insulation, shadowed corners. Rusty nails protruded like broken teeth from the timbers. A lone plank bridged two beams, a forgotten remnant, nothing more. Yet the sensation returned, amplified, a visceral certainty of presence. My pulse hammered against my ribs, my mouth turned to dust. Shoulders rigid, I broke the silence, my voice thin, unnatural in the enclosed space. "Hello?" The word died, absorbed by the dead air. A shiver traced my spine, like icy fingers. Retreating quickly, I slammed the panel shut. A small, simple latch, previously unnoticed, offered a means to secure it. The click echoed faintly in the quiet hall. Down again, sweat beading on my brow. I fought for composure. "It's just an attic. Tomorrow. Plywood. Seal it. Forget it. Paint over the memory." But the wrongness persisted, a dissonant chord humming beneath the surface of thought. Evening descended, bringing little comfort. A cold beer, a dry sandwich, rituals performed without pleasure. I paced the rooms, assessing the remaining work. Walls demanding paint, plumbing needing finesse, floors awaiting sanding. But the house felt alien, charged with a watchful tension. Was that a floorboard settling upstairs, or something else? A faint tap-tap, dismissed as imagination the moment I strained to hear it again. My gaze kept returning to the ceiling, the skin between my shoulder blades prickling. My gut remained a tight knot of apprehension. Sleep promised escape, but offered none. Twice I jolted awake, heart pounding, convinced of phantom footsteps overhead, a dry, whispery scraping. Lying rigid in the dark, breath held captive, I listened. The sounds were ephemeral, perhaps just the groans of old timbers settling into the night, yet sweat slicked my skin. The urge to investigate warred with a profound reluctance to confront that door again. Foolish, maybe. Cowardly, certainly. Fitful sleep eventually reclaimed me, shallow and unrefreshing. Dawn brought resolve. Enough. Armed with a crowbar and a sheet of plywood, I faced the ceiling hatch one final time. Ladder ascended, panel opened, a last quick sweep of the light into that stagnant void. Unchanged, empty, no evidence of disturbance. Yet the bitter taste in my mouth, the clammy sweat on my palms, the white-knuckled grip on the ladder, these spoke a different truth. With grim determination, I slammed the panel shut and began screwing the plywood firmly over it, obliterating the opening from view, sealing it tight against the joists. Each turn of the screw felt like an act of defiance, a ward against the unseen. Done. Finished. The end. Or so I told myself. Throughout the day, as I tackled other tasks, painting, patching, a discordant note hummed beneath my concentration. My ears strained for ceiling noises. In the bathroom, glancing up, I fancied a cool draft where none should exist. Nerves, surely. A phone call to Mateo offered temporary normalcy. I mentioned the peculiar hatch, framing it as an architectural oddity, omitting the suffocating sense of observation. Old places are full of ghosts, he chuckled, meaning structural quirks, not literal specters. We talked of mundane things. The silence rushed back when I hung up, thick and heavy with a familiar tension. Then, late afternoon, a distinct tap, soft, hesitant. I froze mid-stride in the hallway, listening intently. It came again, from above, seemingly from behind the plywood, faint, like a fingernail drumming lightly on wood. A cold fist clenched my chest. My neck locked, blood hammered in my ears. Explanations scrambled, settling wood, heat, expansion, a phantom branch against the roof, though none grew near. Music blared from my phone, a futile shield against the encroaching silence. Outside, the roofline looked unchanged, impassive against the gray sky. Back inside, forcing down dinner, I avoided looking up, yet the feeling intensified whenever I passed beneath the sealed spot. The air there seemed perceptibly cooler, drier. My own fists clenched and unclenched, a physical echo of the internal strain. Night amplified the dread. I woke abruptly, drenched in sweat, to a faint, insistent scraping, not settling sounds this time. It emanated from the hallway ceiling, directly above the plywood. Heart slamming against my ribs, limbs leaden, I forced myself up, flicking on lights that seemed too bright, too revealing. The plywood barrier remained, yet did one corner sit infinitesimally proud? A hair's breadth difference? My fingertip traced the edge, smooth, tight. Imagination, perhaps, fueled by fear. I stood there a long while, staring upward, hands trembling slightly. The silence returned, but the atmosphere crackled, thick with unspoken energy, like the pregnant pause before lightning strikes. Enough hiding. Finding my voice, I spoke into the charged air, not loudly, but with forced conviction. "Stop it!" The word hung there, swallowed by the stillness. Nothing answered. Rubbing a hand over my face, feeling the rasp of stubble and the dampness of fear, I retreated to bed, sleep a distant shore I couldn't reach. Morning light revealed the plywood undisturbed, but beside it, radiating outward, a new detail. A hairline fissure spiderwebbed across the old plaster, infinitesimal, yet undeniably present. I hadn't caused it. My installation had been precise, careful. Touching the plaster near the crack, it felt unnaturally cold. Ear pressed flat against the plywood yielded only silence. I threw myself into work elsewhere, forcing the hallway from my thoughts. Yet each passage tightened the knot in my stomach, constricted the muscles in my neck. An idea sparked, objective proof. Mid-afternoon, I positioned a chair beneath the spot, balanced my phone upon it, camera aimed upward, recording. For an hour, while I measured and soared in the living room, the digital eye watched, reviewing the footage, later revealed nothing. No movement, no sound captured, only a puzzling instant where the hallway light seemed to pulse faintly. An artifact of the camera's sensor adjusting, most likely. Nothing else. Yet the unease remained, undiminished by the lack of evidence. Days blurred into a routine of labor and low-grade anxiety. I painted walls, the chemical tang sharp in my nostrils, hands stained with dust and pigment. Nights involved locking up tight, turning off lights, and listening to the frantic drumbeat of my own heart, sometimes standing sentinel in the hallway's gloom, until exhaustion drove me to a restless bed. The cycle repeated, waking in sweat, checking the hallway, finding nothing tangible changed, yet sensing the unwavering presence. I tried drowning it out with work, with loud music, with sheer force of will, pretending it was fatigue, imagination. Earplugs, closed doors, the drone of a fan, flimsy defenses against a feeling that permeated the very air of that corridor. Nothing concrete ever manifested. No marks, no tangible signs of intrusion. No harm befell me. Mateo helped me wrestle the sofa one afternoon, oblivious, remarking only on the pervasive dust. He never noticed the plywood scar on the ceiling, and I offered no explanation, unwilling to voice the unhinged truth. Eventually, a truce was reached, albeit one of surrender. I finished the other rooms, relocated my bedroom to the far side of the house, and began consciously avoiding the hallway after dark. The plywood remained, a permanent fixture. The door behind it, a secret I refused to revisit. Acceptance, of a sort, settled in. The feeling of being watched persisted, punctuated by phantom taps, but it became a known quantity, a disquieting background hum to the rhythm of my life. When the bulk of the renovations concluded, I slid a tall, heavy bookshelf into the hallway, positioning it directly beneath the sealed square, obscuring it from sight. Out of sight, if not entirely out of mind. Occasionally, a faint sound might snag my attention, but I learned to dismiss it, focusing instead on the solid, the mundane. Time has passed. The feeling hasn't vanished, merely receded, dulled by familiarity perhaps. A low tide of unease. I know, with unwavering certainty, that the hidden space above the hallway is not just empty air and insulation. Sometimes, caught unawares, the sensation of eyes upon me returns, sharp and cold. I flinch, then force myself onward, back to the rhythm of the day. The door remains sealed. Nothing has ever emerged. There is no proof, nothing tangible beyond memory and sensation. Just an old house, aging wood, settled dust. But I remember the suffocating air, the primal certainty of not being alone in that cramped darkness. No grand theories form, no desire stirs to call paranormal investigators or tear open the ceiling again. That chapter is closed. This house, with its flaws and its secrets, is mine. Whatever resides or resided behind that panel, it remains, watching silently from its self-contained void. It hasn't harmed me, and so I coexist with it, head down, focusing on the task at hand. When the prickle of observation returns, I acknowledge it and keep moving. What other choice is there?